Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Coming up today on The Story.
I felt totally trapped, and I realised I was in that last year before I was very ill. I realised, I'm still singing, would you believe? Through all this, I'm still doing big concerts and travelling and so on. But inside I was not with the Lord. I was broken.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colfax. Welcome to The Story. Well, today we have part 2 of our conversation with opera singer Michele Hodgson, who's sharing her life journey with us. Last time we heard how she grew up in the Melbourne area, but then won a scholarship for young artists to sing in Europe. There she sang with the big names in the business like Placido Domingo and Andrea Bocelli, and it looked like the sky was the limit for her singing career. But sadly, her marriage broke up, and she says that she lost her way and began isolating herself away from God and her Christian friends. Today we'll hear what happened next in her life and the miraculous way God gets her attention. Once again, Michele is chatting with Eric Scatterbo in our Melbourne studios.
And what was sad, and I had quite a lot of shame about this, is that I didn't reach out to God at that time. I felt like I needed to be by myself, which was, but that's a tragedy to do that because you need support. And I always encourage people, even my students, when they're going through all that type of hardship, don't be alone. Yeah. I was by myself.
Well, that's what the devil wants us to do.
Yeah.
Just isolate and kind of lick your wounds.
Yeah, but I isolated in a very big way. I isolated from my family, from my friends at church, and I was under a lot of pressure because I had several months' rent due and there was no money. I was in a quiet state. You get waves when you have a career in music where you have highs and a lot of work and a lot of ebbs and flows. And he left right on a low, so I had to.
And you're living in Barcelona. I don't know, is that expensive place to live?
Not too bad. But my rent was expensive where we were with the kids, and I was working 8 o'clock to 8 p.m. teaching to pay the rent, teaching singing, and I loved it. Thank God I loved teaching. But I had my daughter. Actually, I spoke to her recently, and she says, "I remember you just sitting at the piano day in, day out, teaching people to pay the rent at that time." And that was a hard I got into overdrive and said, I need to support my family, I need to pay the rent, I need to pay the bills, I need to raise my kids. And it was pretty hard. But it was I felt distant from God, and I was a bit hurt by it. And
did you blame God?
I didn't blame. I didn't feel hate towards God or blame, but I just felt I needed to be away, and I pulled away. But it was happening very slowly and subtly. It didn't happen all of a sudden. It was sort of, I started to slow down going to church. I started to slow down seeing my Christian friends and other friends. It was gradual
pulling away or fading of your faith?
It felt like a fading. It felt like a distancing. And it was subtle enough that I didn't even realise how far I was going from him, and how, other things were creeping into my life at that time. Yeah. And so in under the pressure of all these things, you start not living the holiest life there is. I have to admit that I wasn't the holiest living person at that time.
But then more bad news.
Yeah. Well, I did end up with somebody, and he was in the beginning. He was a man, and but
so you got into another relationship.
I got into another relationship, but he supported my music in the beginning and my career, but it was very hard because he had his ideas and I had mine. And at that time, by then, my ex-husband left with my son back to Australia, and then my daughter a year later left as well, and I was still stuck in Spain with that current boyfriend, you can say.
Yeah.
And I felt totally trapped. And I realized I think in that last year before I was very ill, I realized, I'm still singing, would you believe?
Through all this,
I'm still doing big concerts and traveling and so on.
But inside
I was not with the Lord. And it's a horrible thing. You're being with the Lord or being without the Lord. I would not recommend being without him. Even if things seem good on the outside and my Facebook looks brilliant, but I was broken. And at that point, I started to even stop singing. It just got that
something which brought so much joy in your life.
I left because I wanted to prove myself to this man. I needed to work full time and earn money like everybody else, have a different type of lifestyle so that he would accept me. And he did not accept, he didn't want to marry me. It was quite a tragic thing. And in that last year, I was in Barcelona. I ended up with, they say you get it from mosquitoes. A mosquito bite, and it's called encephalitis. It's an infection of the brain. And it's one of the
Is
most
it stress
dangerous.
related or
Stress triggers it. You might have a dormant bite. They think I was bitten while I was back in Australia on a trip, and then I came back and I had encephalitis. And it came on while I was working this 9-to-5 job. I was down, I was stressed, I wasn't happy. And this thing came on which caused me to collapse at work with convulsions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was probably the worst experience I've ever experienced, ever imagined that anyone could experience, really. Falling, you're falling, you can't control it, you fall into it, and then you're out in convulsing. While I was in this first convulsion, I had a vision which was intensely powerful. I opened my eyes into this vision, and there was bright light. They say the lights. It was like that.
Well, like you hear about when people have near-death experiences?
It was an absolute near-death. I saw this. It was like a semicircle room, bright with these lights coming. It's just so. It was a beautiful light, but it was so blinding. But it wasn't painful. It was just beautiful. And a woman was standing. First I saw a woman in white, and to me she could have been an angel. I know, but it wasn't clear who she was. But she spoke, and I couldn't hear her words. She's sort of speaking to me, and then I came to and came back to consciousness. And at that point, my boyfriend had arrived at the hospital because I was at the hospital. And I was talking to him, and I told him this vision, and he just looked at me like I was...
So he obviously is not a believer.
He was not a believer. He was not a believer. In fact, his previous wife died, and he has a hatred of God, actually.
Oh.
So it was hard. That was very difficult. So
not a healthy relationship.
No, it was not at that point, especially at that point. It was 6 years with this man.
Why do you think you were attracted to him if he was so anti-God and you were so pro-faith in the Lord?
I think I didn't realize that he's, in the beginning of the relationship with someone, you don't always know their deep heart.
Honeymoon.
After the year or two, and then you start seeing who they are. And
the true colors.
The true colors. But then I was bound in that relationship because of, my circumstances at the time. I became a bit dependent on him, and that was not a good place to be.
So you're financially dependent. Living in the same place.
So I did move in and live with him without wed, being married, and I knew.
So now you kind of abandoned him.
At that point, I was really far from. I had spiraled so far that I didn't
away
pray.
From the Lord.
I didn't pray. I didn't do this type of thing. But when I had that vision, it reminded me of who
Your
my
roots.
relationship,
Yeah.
my relationship with God that I had abandoned. It was me who abandoned.
Yeah.
It was he didn't leave me.
Yep.
It was me
Yeah.
who had turned in my pain. And we do that when we're pain. Sometimes we have pain and you don't want to, but you just don't know what to do. And you start to pull away from God, pull away from the church, pull away from your Christian friends and your Christian circles, because you feel shame, you feel hurt, you feel you feel like this total rejections. So I mean, I after this, when this encephalitis hit me, I had this first convulsion. I came out of that remembering God, and it all came. It's like that first experience when I realized God is my Father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly, I had that same.
Your father wanted you back?
He did. He wanted me back, and I had that. I saw, and I felt that same spirit, that same love, and the embrace of God. It's just that type of spiritual love is you cannot have it in anybody or anything in this world. Not even the singing. Not even the singing. Even the euphoria of performance. The love of God is so much more potent and real. And while I was talking to my ex-boyfriend, I said, I don't know what's going on. I had this high fever. I was very ill. And my brain was exploding with the encephalitis because it was my brain was literally swelling up in my head. I had a second convulsion and I was back at the room.
Oh, the same vision.
It was like a second vision of heaven, or whatever you want to call it, of this holy place. And I saw a man, this time in white. He had a black beard and he stood in front of me, and my soul, my whole chest jumped into my throat, and like I was shocked when I saw him. It's just the power of him in front of me, and he said, you haven't lived the way you were supposed to, and you've gone far away. Come back, and you have so much more to give. It's not your time, it's time for you to return. And they put me in a coma, induced coma, because my brain was just too swollen. And then when I awoke, they stopped they didn't know if I was going to wake up. I was. They said the chances of her waking up between 30 and 40%. It was. I was in a very bad place. They didn't know what it was at first. They thought it was meningitis. They did spinal tap and all these things while I was unconscious. And then they finally realised what it was. When I woke, I couldn't remember much. I lost my memory.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is once again chatting with opera singer Michele Hodgson, who's sharing her life journey with us. As we just heard, at a low point in her life, she isolated herself from God and her Christian friends. But then in 2019, after contracting a severe brain infection, she had a near-death experience and had a vision from God. He was telling her to come back to him. We'll find out what happened next as we hear more of Michele's story when we return.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colfax, and this is The Story. Our guest today is once again opera singer Michele Hodgson, who's sharing her life journey with us. And at this point, she's no longer singing and has contracted a severe brain infection. Now we'll hear what happened next in her life as she continues her chat with Eric Scatterbo.
It was in the left-hand side. I can even pinpoint where the pain was so severe at the front. It's the frontal lobe, in the temporal lobe. And I couldn't even name my children.
Oh.
I couldn't. I spoke to them on the phone from Australia. And all I could call them was baby, or I couldn't remember their names. I couldn't count numbers at all. I couldn't understand numbers. I'd lost the function of the left-hand side of the brain. But I could sing an opera in my head.
Huh.
I couldn't sing it,
Yeah.
but I could remember all the words of the operas.
Isn't that interesting?
It was fascinating, but at the time I was traumatized.
At the time you're not thinking about how
I was
fascinating it is.
traumatized that I couldn't use my brain function.
Yeah, that had to be
100%.
scary.
They were saying that I may not regain my brain function. And I prayed. I prayed to God. I reached out to him in such a way that in my heart, I couldn't even articulate it with words. Laying in the hospital bed, unable to piece together my mind. But I would be praying, and I need to come home. I need my mind back. And I prayed, and my mother found out. My mother's an intercessor, actually. And she was praying for me in Australia, and I could feel her prayer all the way in Spain. And fortunately, within 2-3 weeks, the numbers came back.
Oh, okay.
Very small. I had to really slowly remember. I couldn't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I couldn't count those. I couldn't make sense of number. And I remember people's names when I saw them. I could remember their names, and it started to come back. Things were I could function, but I looked terrible. My eyes were swollen. My head I had things coming out of my head and all these wires, and it was the most traumatic experience I've ever experienced in my life.
Especially when you didn't know if you'd ever regained your memory.
No.
And numbers functioning and counting and all that.
What I was glad I was so happy to be alive. And people take for granted the breath that every morning they wake up.
Yeah.
I at that point I was, I'm alive. I've got a chance to do something positive in this world and this life, I'm
just thinking, what a contrast. I mean, just a few years before, you were at the absolute peak, the dream opera singer, and then
living that dream, and I was at the total. But it wasn't the music. It wasn't it was being far from God. God allowed that situation to happen for me. I don't even see it as a bad thing anymore. I actually thank God for that to happen. Because I found him again. That's a tragedy. And it was scary at the time. It was painful. My brain was exploding. It was a terrible experience. But I thank God for that to happen, because it shook me enough to...
Got your attention.
It got my attention, and I was able to be in his presence again and use his gift. People used to get healed when I sang. When I was very young, I would sing How Great Thou Art in a classical voice. And there was one time in church. I want to come back to that. I want the Lord to bless me with that gift again, because it's a gift.
Yeah.
I was in church and in the service, and I sang, "Then sings my soul, my Saviour God, to thee." And one man's ears popped, and he was deaf, and he heard.
Oh.
Yeah.
Not everybody can say that.
It didn't happen frequently, but when it did happen, I knew God had plans. He was using a gift to his.
So God got your attention.
He got my attention. I
went back to him? Is that?
I started worshipping again. I would be alone, away from my boyfriend, and I was in the bedroom and just worshipping my old song, whatever songs I could remember, in my hymns and my songs and hill songs and whatever I could remember. And I regained the relationship that I'd lost
With your Heavenly Father?
with my Father in heaven.
And at that point, what did you want to do next?
Well, this is where it all. It's for me. I don't break relationships. It's really hard for me to do that. You know, I didn't break with my husband even when things were bad, and he left. But with this man, I didn't want to break it. But then God was saying, "You're not living a holy life with this man." So I had to make a big decision and walk away. But I was struggling to do that. I wasn't very strong. And what happened, my poor daughter ended up with, she's still got Graves' disease. She has, Graves' disease is when it's an autoimmune disease where the thyroid is overstimulated at times. She was going through a hard time and ringing me from Australia and saying, "Mum, I want you to come home." And I think, okay, I don't have money, but let's see how we do this. So I continued working, and the business, funny, this whole department closed and I got a payout.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I called that a divine intervention.
Yeah.
And I started to try to get myself home. It was really, really hard because I wasn't even, at that last year, I wasn't singing anymore in opera there. And I wanted to be with my family. And a friend of mine from church, she said, "You can stay at my house until you're ready to go." And she supported me. She's actually my singing student from Spain. I still teach her from Spain.
Oh, is that right?
It's amazing.
Via Zoom or something?
Via Zoom.
Oh, okay.
But she said, "Stay." I think she felt that I needed a helping hand. And I felt, I'm reaching out to God, I'm reaching out to her. And suddenly I had the money. And I got a word from God, like a scriptural thing that for I know the plans, and that scripture in Jeremiah just said I've got the faith to take the big step to go home, because I'm pretty much going, after 15 years, going back to no home, no house, no job, no anything.
Well, that was part 2 of Eric Scadabow's conversation with opera singer Michele Hodgson, who's originally from Melbourne, but as a young adult, she won a prestigious scholarship to sing in Europe and went on to live in Spain for 15 years. But as we've been hearing, her successful singing career began to unravel after a painful divorce, and she contracted a severe brain infection. Next time, we'll hear how the Lord works to heal her life after she returns to Australia. Also, we'll hear how she regains her love for singing and the joy that it brings her. It kind of reminds me of a famous quote from the Christian gold medal runner Eric Liddell, who said, "I believe God made me for a purpose, and when I run, I feel his pleasure." And for Michele, when she sings, she feels God's pleasure, and it fills her cup to overflowing. We'll hear how the Lord works this all out next time as we hear more of Michele Hodgson's story. Until then, I'm Jimmy Colfax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
One of the things God taught me from a very shy, young, timid girl is that when God gives you a gift, that's all you need. You don't have to be shy. You can be powerful in that gift, and that gives him glory. I say you can be whoever you can be. God can make it happen. And I'm a testimony of that.
Opera singer Michele Hodgson joins us once again to share more of her story and how she regained her love for singing after contracting a severe brain infection. Also, we'll hear how she's using her gift for the Lord. All that and more is coming up next time.
The Story.
Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.